In the ant kingdom, not all wars are loud. Some take place in silence, some are fought with poison, and some are never noticed until it's far too late. In this episode of BattleAnts, we reveal 4 chilling stories, where victory means manipulation, and survival comes at a price. From queens dethroned without a fight, to skies painted with blood, to the sweetest death ever delivered. These are the hidden wars beneath your feet. Welcome to BattleAnts. Episode 3. A single foreign ant cautiously approaches the entrance of an unsuspecting colony. Just one wrong move and she could get crushed by one of the many guards standing in her way. But luckily for her, these guards aren't all that bright. So instead of getting squished, she has a trick up her sleeve that allows her to sneak inside undetected. And once inside, she wastes no time in eliminating the competition and seizing control of this massive colony of thousands of ants. But what's even more unbelievable is that she does all of this without so much as lifting a single mandible in aggression. So how does a single ant take over a whole colony without fighting? Well, first things first, our story begins with our hero ant, who we'll call Alex, because why not? Alex is just your typical ant, trying to live her best life, searching for food, building her colony, laying eggs, just the usual ant stuff. But then one day, while out foraging, she comes across a new and exciting scent. It's the pheromone trail of a different colony of ants, one that she could potentially join. Pheromones are chemical signals released into the environment by insects like ants to communicate with other members of their colony. They're basically like the secret language of insects. But here's where things get interesting. You see, ants have different pheromones for different purposes. For example, when an ant finds a good source of food, it will release a pheromone trail back to the colony to let the others know where to find it. Or when a colony is under attack, ants will release alarm pheromones to warn the others and get them ready to fight. These pheromones can also be used to identify members of your own colony and distinguish them from those pesky invaders. So when Alex picks up the scent of this new colony, she knows she might be in luck. Now, if she were to approach the colony head-on, she'd probably be met with some very unfriendly faces. Most ants are pretty territorial and will attack anyone who invades their space, which is why Alex needs a better plan. As she gets closer, she starts to release her own pheromones, which coincidentally are nearly identical to those of the colony she's trying to infiltrate. This is her secret weapon, one that will allow her to blend in and eventually take over the entire colony without lifting a finger. To make this work, though she needs to play her cards right, the trick is to release just enough of her pheromones to confuse the guards, but not so much that they become suspicious. It's a delicate balance, but she's an experienced spy and knows exactly what to do. The guards detect her approaching scent and prepare for battle, but they're too confused to put up much of a fight. They let her enter the colony undetected, and once inside, she wasted no time in making her move. She marches straight to the queen's chamber, where the real queen of this colony is laying her eggs and generally just chilling out. Alex doesn't waste any time. She climbs onto the queen's throne and starts releasing even more of her pheromones. At this point, she's essentially broadcasting to the entire colony, "Hey, everyone, look at me. I'm the new queen." Now, this is where things start to get really interesting, because there's a few different ways this could go. Depending on the species of ants, there are a few different ways that a new queen can take over an existing colony. In some cases, the new queen will simply kill the old queen. However, in other cases, the new queen will actually replace the old queen by laying her own eggs. That's right. Instead of killing the old queen, she just lets her workers raise her own babies and eventually takes over the colony that way. It's like a real-life Game of Thrones, except with ants. But why would she do this? Well, it turns out that it's actually in the best interest of the colony as a whole. You see, when a new queen takes over a colony, she brings with her new genes that can help the colony adapt to changes in the environment, or even fend off attacks from other colonies. By killing the old queen, she eliminates the risk of inbreeding, which can weaken a colony over time. Plus, by laying her own eggs, she can ensure that her own daughters will take over the colony after her, so it's a win-win for everyone involved. Of course, the old queen doesn't really get a say in the matter. But hey, it's not like she's going to stand around and let this happen. Fights between queens can be brutal, with each side using every trick in the book to eliminate the other. But Alex is confident in her abilities and isn't afraid to get her hands dirty. She engages the old queen in battle, and despite the ferocity of her opponent, she manages to come out on top. With the old queen defeated, Alex wasted no time in cementing her place as the new leader of this colony. But here's the thing. While Alex may be the new queen, she still needs the workers of the colony to do the actual work. You see, most ant colonies are made up of 3 different types of ants: the queen, the workers, and the males. The queen is responsible for laying eggs and producing more ants. The workers are sterile females who do all the work, like foraging for food, building the nest, and taking care of the young. And the males are there to mate with the queen. So while Alex is the top ant in this colony, she still needs the workers to do the actual work, and convincing them that she's the new queen is crucial to the success of her takeover. You see, when a new queen takes over a colony, it's not uncommon for the workers to continue to serve the old queen, even if she's dead. That's because the workers are programmed to follow the pheromone trails of the queen. And if they don't detect any new queen pheromones, they'll just keep doing what they've always done. So Alex needs to convince the workers that she's the new queen. But how does she do that? Well, luckily for her, she has a secret weapon: her eggs. You see, when a new queen lays her first batch of eggs, she's able to produce a special pheromone that will convince the workers that these eggs are the most important thing in the world. Basically, she is able to manipulate the workers into thinking that her eggs are the next generation of the colony, and that they need to be protected at all costs. It's like a Jedi mind trick, but with pheromones. The workers fall for it, hook, line, and sinker, and become convinced that Alex is the true queen. They abandon their previous queen and rally behind the new one, pledging their loyalty and strength to her. From that moment on, Alex rules the colony with an iron fist, or should I say mandible. But wait, there's a twist in the story. You see, while the workers may have accepted Alex as their new queen, they don't realize that she's not actually from their colony at all. That's right, Alex is a spy who has infiltrated their colony and taken over without them even realizing it. And the real queen of this colony is none other than the one they thought they were serving all along. That's because the real queen was the one who sent Alex to spy on the colony in the first place. See, when a queen ant decides it's time to start a new colony, she sends out a small group of her daughters to find a suitable location. Once they've found a good spot, they establish a new colony, and the original queen moves in with her daughters. It's like a reverse takeover. Instead of a daughter taking over the mother's colony, the mother takes over her daughter's colony. But the daughters don't seem to mind. They accept their mother as the new queen, and everything goes back to normal. The colony grows and thrives under the new queen's leadership, and the workers never realize that they were duped by her daughter's clever disguise. But why would the queen do this? Well, it turns out that it's actually in the best interest of the colony as a whole. You see, when a queen establishes a new colony, she brings with her a new set of genes that can help the colony adapt to changes in the environment or fend off attacks from other colonies. Plus, by moving into her daughter's colony, she's able to ensure that her bloodline continues even if something happens to the original colony. It's like an insurance policy, but for ants. So while the workers may not realize that they're serving a stranger, they can take comfort in knowing that their colony is now even stronger and more resilient than before. And that's how a single ant took over a whole colony without fighting. Do you think you could pull off a heist like Alex? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching. Not every invasion needs violence, but when food runs out, violence becomes survival. Part 2. The Cannibal Nest. It was the dry season, and the sun had been beating down on the ground for months. There hadn't been any rain, and water was becoming scarce. The little streams had dried up, and now the ants had to venture further away from their nest to look for food and water. One day, a scout came back to the nest empty-handed. He had searched everywhere but couldn't find anything. All he saw were dead bugs and plants wilting under the sun. This would be the first time in 6 years that the colony wouldn't be able to gather enough food for winter. They needed to take drastic measures. They sent out more scouts, but this only made things worse. Days passed by, and the colony started getting desperate. Even the queen's daily ration of eggs started decreasing. She laid one less egg every day. At this rate, the colony would die within a few weeks. One day, a hungry worker ant ventured into the nursery to get some larvae. Normally, it was forbidden to enter here, but desperate times call for desperate measures. As he walked past the rows and rows of sleeping larvae, one of them suddenly moved. The ant froze. If anyone found out that he was eating the larvae, he would be put to death. But his hunger got the best of him, and he picked up the larva and started chewing on it. It tasted like a protein shake, and after drinking its juices, he licked his chops. It was so good. The ant figured no one would know about this, so he went back to the nursery every day to steal larvae. Other workers started doing the same thing, and soon there were fewer and fewer larvae in the nursery. Then one day, the soldiers came to investigate. They found the worker ants happily munching on the larvae, and although the soldiers were hungry, too, they knew this was wrong. Taking care of the larvae was the most important job in the colony. Without them, the colony would die out, and these workers were risking it all for a quick snack. However, they also hadn't eaten in days and were losing strength. The soldier ants decided to come back later, but as soon as they left, another group of worker ants came into the nursery. They picked up the remaining larvae and brought them to the center of the nest. All the worker ants gathered together and waited. Then they all started biting into the larvae at the same time. They ate the larvae with such force that many of them died right then and there. They were ripped apart limb from limb. A soldier ant who had come to investigate saw what was happening and immediately ran to warn the others. Maybe if they got there in time, they could save some of the larvae. But when they got to the nursery, it was empty. Only a few chewed-up pieces of larvae remained, and those were quickly devoured by the soldiers. The colony was doomed. If they didn't find food very soon, they would die of starvation. The next morning, the queen woke up feeling weak and dizzy. Her legs didn't want to move. She knew she had to get up and keep laying eggs, but she just couldn't find the strength. Suddenly, she felt something land on her. She opened her eyes to see a worker ant sucking on her abdomen. She screamed and tried to bite him, but it was no use. There were too many ants, and soon, dozens of them were swarming over her, biting and stinging her with their mandibles and stingers. As the ants swarmed over her, she could see one of the workers carrying her eggs out of the nest. They weren't going to lay them. They were going to eat them. Just thinking about it made her sick to her stomach, but she knew it was too late to do anything now. She could hear the workers discussing what to do with her. "We can't carry her," said one of them. "She's too heavy." Another said, "Let's cut her legs off so we can carry her to the surface." Then another said, "No, let's wait a bit longer. Maybe she'll become paralyzed and then we can carry her out." They agreed to wait, and so they left her alone in the middle of the nest. As she lay there waiting for death to come, she thought about how it had all gone wrong. The colony had been through so much, and now it was ending like this. She wondered if the colony would ever recover, but she knew the answer was no. Winter was coming, and without food, the colony would never survive. Soon, her legs started to feel numb. She could feel herself being paralyzed, and she knew it was finally time. The ants returned, and she could hear them talking excitedly. "It's working. She's paralyzed. We can carry her out now." They started biting her legs, trying to detach them, but they couldn't. They were too strong. The queen struggled to move, but she couldn't. Her legs were stuck to her body. Suddenly, one of the ants had an idea. "We need to make a hole in the ceiling. That way we can lower her down onto the ground." They all started digging at the ceiling until it collapsed, creating a big hole leading to the outside. Then they started pushing her towards the hole. She felt herself being dragged across the ground, and then she was dropped right into the center of the colony. The ants started carrying her eggs outside, but there weren't many left. The queen had stopped laying eggs long ago, and most of them had already been eaten. The ants carried the eggs out of the nest and laid them in a pile. Then they all turned back to face the queen. "What should we do with her?" asked one of the ants. "Eat her," said another, and so they did. The ants started biting into her, ripping her apart limb from limb. They ate her as fast as they could, and soon there was nothing left of her. The colony had survived for 6 years, and during that time, they had gathered a lot of food. Now they were eating everything they could find, and they would even eat each other. The colony was slowly becoming cannibalistic. The next morning, the sky was dark and the wind was blowing hard. A storm was coming. The ants were busy carrying their eggs back into the nest, when suddenly the ground started shaking. The ants looked up in fear as a large bird swooped down from the sky and started pecking at the ground. It was looking for food. The ants quickly ran back into the nest and hid. The bird continued to peck at the ground, and it was only a matter of time before it found the eggs. Suddenly, the ground shook again, and the bird squawked in surprise as a large black beetle landed on top of it. The beetle started biting and stinging the bird, and it flew away with its wings torn. The ants came out of the nest to see what had happened. The bird had flown away, but the eggs were still there. The ants started carrying the eggs back into the nest, and this time they hid them deep inside. The bird might be able to find some of the eggs, but not all of them. The next morning, the ants were woken up by the sound of chirping. They came out of the nest to see a large ant colony setting up their new home right next to them. The ants quickly ran back into the nest and closed the entrance. They didn't want the other ants to find their new home. But the other ants were already there. They had followed the scent of the colony and were now marching towards the entrance. The ants fought bravely, but they were outnumbered, and eventually they were forced out of their nest. The other ants took over their home, and the original colony was forced to move away. The colony had been through so much, but now it was finally over. The colony had been completely destroyed. The only thing that remained of it was a pile of dead bodies outside the nest. The wind blew through the forest and carried the scent of the dead ants away. Soon, no one would remember that this colony had ever existed. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please leave a like and comment. Also check out my other videos. I hope to see you next time. Bye. The war below the ground is over. Now, the battle moves to the sky. Wings rise, blood falls. Part 3. The War of Wings. If you thought your workplace was toxic, just wait until you hear about what happens to male ants during mating season. Forget backstabbing and office gossip. These guys literally kill each other mid-flight. This brutal airborne battle is called the War of Wings, and if you're a male ant, it's not just a fight for dominance. It's a fight for your life. Welcome back, everyone. I'm here with Minute Metaphor. Now we've all heard about those freaky ant mating rituals where the queen takes flight with a bunch of males, and then they mate while falling through the air. But did you know that before this aerial mating, there's a mid-air massacre? Every year when spring hits, male ants get restless. They can sense that their colony sisters are about to emerge from the ground, shake off their winter lethargy, and find a fig or leaf to lay their eggs in. Once the fig leaves start sprouting, male ants across the landscape know it's time to get busy. There's no hesitation. No matter where they are, they immediately take flight. In some ant species, males only make up 1% of the colony. So when mating season rolls around, thousands of young men swarm into the air, leaving their familiar fig or leaf. For others, like the carpenter ant Camponotus herculinus, half the colony is male. So when mating season rolls around, tens of thousands of young men take flight, leaving their fig or leaf behind. Now you might think that after such a long winter, these ants would be ready to party. Maybe they'd spend their spring fling getting busy with as many mates as possible, or at least finding a nice fig leaf to lay their eggs in. But instead, these ants engage in a bit of murder, suicide, and mayhem. In a classic story of sexual selection, male ants fight tooth and nail to become the first to reach their colony sisters. And yeah, that means that most of them die trying. Like any good fight, there are rules. Male ants don't attack on the ground. They only battle in the air. Flying into each other with swords outstretched, these tiny titans clash. Razor-sharp mandibles tear into exoskeletons' bodies, spin through the air, legs flailing as wings get tangled. Some land on the ground, bloodied but alive, only to take to the skies again to fight another day. Now, we don't exactly know why these ants fight mid-air rather than on the ground. But we do know that there are benefits to being the first to reach the figs or leaves. The first males to arrive can mate with more females than the latecomers. Plus, since the females are laying the eggs that will become the next generation of the colony, the first males to reach them have the best shot at fathering the next generation of ants. So the stakes are high, and the fighting is fierce. This aerial ballet of death has been witnessed by humans only a few times, so we still have a lot to learn about it. But thanks to the work of Daniel Robert, an evolutionary biologist at the University of Tours in France, we now know that the War of Wings is even more dramatic than we thought. Not only does the conflict rage between unrelated males from different colonies, it also rages within related males from the same colony. In some species, once the males emerge from the ground, a subset of them begins murdering the rest. Yeah, we said murder, not suicide, because these males aren't dying in battle. Instead, they're picking off their brothers one by one, sometimes biting off wings and legs until the other male succumbs and falls to the ground. This fratricidal phase of the mating ritual was news to scientists as well as to the ants themselves, because nobody noticed it happening until Robert set up a camera to record his subjects around the clock. What he saw shocked him. The male ants were killing each other before anyone else even got to the figs. And it turns out that these serial killers aren't even trying to mate. They're sterile. In fact, every male ant that kills during the War of Wings is infertile. Since the males themselves can't pass on their genes, the theory goes that they're really only trying to ensure the queen's line continues. By eliminating as many males as possible, they increase their own chances of being the one to fertilize the eggs laid by the virgin queens. To figure this out, Robert and his team spent months recording 5 species of fig wasps in southern France. Not only did they observe the fratricide, they experienced it firsthand. One time, Robert opened a fig to find 30 dead males inside, their bodies piled on top of each other. The killer was missing, but they left behind a telltale clue. Its abdomen was distended, meaning it had recently consumed fig sap, a sure sign that it was a member of their study colony. So, by tracking down which males had access to the fig and comparing their DNA, Robert and his team could identify the culprit. And who was the killer? Well, it wasn't some big strong male. It was always the littlest male in the colony, the dwarf males. They're small enough to hide under the pools, the little flaps that cover the fig's opening, and they strike fast and suddenly when the fig is still young and But the male ants aren't the only ones who benefit from this airborne slaughter. The females do too. When Robert observed a fig that was being attacked, he saw that a new fig nearby remained untouched. That meant that the females were directing their fig-guarding brothers to eliminate the males that were attacking them, making sure that they could continue laying eggs. And as the name suggests, the War of Wings isn't just about fighting. Once the males are dead, the surviving males quickly take to the sky again, this time to meet up with their virgin sisters and mate with them before they head off to find a fig or leaf to lay their eggs in. So to review, the male ants kill each other in the air to ensure that their colony sisters survive and are able to reproduce. And as if that weren't weird enough, the males who do all the killing are the ones who can't reproduce themselves. It makes you wonder what role the fig wasps played in all of this. Well, it turns out that the fig wasps are smart, too. They actually recruit the male ants to do their bidding. As soon as the male ants emerge from the fig, the wasp larvae begin wiggling their abdomens to attract them. And once the males are focused on the fig, the wasps bite off their legs, pinning them in place. Then the males regurgitate fig sap onto the wasps, feeding them and helping them grow up fast. In less than 2 weeks, the male ants have built fig nurseries and are feeding fig wasp larvae. And as soon as the males are done playing nursemaid, the fig wasps turn on them and start biting their legs, pinning them to the fig wall. This is the cue for the males to begin killing each other, so the fig wasps can crawl over to the fig and lay their eggs. So it turns out the sky-high battles that we thought were part of the fig wasps' mating ritual are actually part of a power play gone awry. The fig wasps tricked the male ants into doing all the work, and now they're retaking over the fig entirely. The males don't notice until it's too late. Now we don't know exactly how much genetic material the male ants share, but the males that kill must be very closely related to the ones they kill. If you want to learn more about the ways that closely related organisms can end up at war with each other, check out our episode on inbreeding depression. The skies have calmed, the colony lives on, but sometimes a single drop is enough to end an empire. Part 4. The Toxic Gift. Have you ever seen a honeybee fly? It's an incredibly impressive sight. Not only do they fly backwards, but they can also fly forwards, sideways, and even hover in midair. But for a worker ant, seeing one is quite a shock. After all, worker ants don't usually look up. They prefer to stick their heads down and carry on with their day. So when this worker ant saw a honeybee for the first time, it was quite the surprise. In fact, it was so much of a surprise that the little ant froze in its tracks. It couldn't move. It couldn't even respond to the other ants calling out to it. Fortunately for the little ant, it was carrying food back to the colony. And so it didn't take too long for the other ants to realize something was wrong. They quickly rushed over and tried to pull it back to its senses. However, whatever had stunned this ant seemed to be contagious. And before they knew it, several of the ants were paralyzed and frozen. But what had happened? What strange magic had frozen these ants like this? There had been a new plant growing near the anthill recently, and the scout ants had found it. At first, everything seemed fine. It was just another ordinary plant with white flowers. Plus, it produced a sweet nectar that was very tasty. In fact, the more the ants ate, the more they wanted to eat. However, they soon realized that there was a problem. See, this new plant was toxic. Yet the ants kept coming back for more. And they would have kept doing this if the colony hadn't sent out reinforcements. But who would have guessed that this plant had a very good reason for being toxic? That's because it evolved to kill ants, and it does this by paralyzing them with a powerful poison. But before we continue, make sure to subscribe if you haven't, so that you won't miss any new videos. When the colony realized that something was wrong with the foraging ants, they quickly sent out some reinforcements. This included the strongest and smartest ants in the colony. Sure enough, as they got closer to the foraging ants, they started feeling the effects of the magic too. Soon, several of these super ants were also frozen in place. Now, panic started to spread through the colony. What was happening to their best and brightest? Why did the foraging ants keep bringing back this dangerous food? Unfortunately, the colony didn't know the answer. No one did, however, no one needed to. All they needed to do was find the source of the magic. But how could they do that? There were so many plants nearby, and they all looked the same. Fortunately for the ants, one of the worker ants remembered where the foraging ants had gone earlier. Surely enough, when they arrived at the plant, they found dozens of their fellow ants frozen in place. And that's when they noticed something weird. All of these ants seemed to be pointing their feelers towards the center of the plant. What did they see in the middle? A single drop of nectar. It wasn't like any nectar the ants had ever seen before. In fact, it was completely black. But even though it looked weird, the ants couldn't help but crawl towards it. After all, whatever this magic was, it seemed to come from this drop of nectar. And once they got close enough, they finally understood why the ants were pointing their feelers towards it. This drop of nectar contained the key to saving or destroying the entire colony. Yet even though this discovery was huge, none of the ants knew what to do next. They were frozen, literally. However, one ant did manage to break free from the magic. And as it moved away from the plant, it suddenly felt like a huge weight had been lifted off its shoulders. It could think properly again. But what had happened? What was so special about this drop of nectar? Well, the thing is, it wasn't any ordinary nectar. It contained a powerful poison, a poison that shut down the minds of the ants. Yet the poison didn't work right away. It took several hours to kick in, and that's why some of the ants managed to escape its effects. But that also meant that the ants had a limited amount of time to get away from this plant. If they stayed too long, the poison would eventually wear off, and they would be frozen forever. With that said, the ants quickly ran away from the plant and warned the rest of the colony. The ants listened and immediately started moving away from the anthill. Sure, the poison hadn't affected them yet, but they didn't want to take the chance. Eventually, the entire colony was far away from the plant, just as the poison started to kick in and freeze the ants. But where did this plant come from? It had simply appeared one day, and yet it knew exactly what it was doing. You see, this plant was no ordinary plant. It had evolved to target ants specifically, and it did this by releasing pheromones into the air. These are chemicals that ants use to communicate with each other, and this plant's pheromones mimicked the pheromones of a honeybee. As you may have guessed, this was the plant's way of calling out to the ants. It lured them in by pretending to be a bee, and then it killed them with its toxic nectar. This might sound evil, but this plant didn't evolve this trait out of pure evilness. After all, plants don't really think about what they're doing. It simply evolved this trait for protection. You see, when a honeybee flies over the plant will release its pheromones and attract some ants. Then when the ants touch the nectar, the plant will secrete a sticky substance that holds the ants in place. Finally, the plant will start to grow around the dead ants, using their bodies as nutrients and protection. This allows the plant to grow bigger and stronger than the other plants, which means it can produce more fruit and more seeds. And that's how the cycle continues. However, not all plants are like this. Most plants don't try to kill animals. They simply want to use them to spread their pollen. And some plants have found some very interesting ways to do this. For example, there's the monkey puzzle tree. Its branches are sharp and the tree has no leaves. Basically, it looks like a porcupine. Yet somehow, this tree manages to attract animals. And that's because the tree produces some very delicious fruit. Even though the fruit is delicious, it's also very hard to get to since the tree has very few branches. Yet animals are willing to put up with this because they love the fruit so much. Sure, they might get pricked a few times on the way, but they don't seem to care. And that's not the only interesting plant out there. Take the capensis for example. It lures in insects by pretending to be a small animal. It does this by opening and closing its mouth at random intervals. Yet somehow, this trick still works. Insects are tricked every year and fall into the pitcher plant's trap. Or how about the bladderwort? This plant is found in both water and on land, and its roots are modified into small bladders. These bladders contain small hairs that sense when an insect touches them. As soon as an insect touches them, the bladders suck them in and trap them inside. Yet perhaps the most impressive plant out there is the sundew capensis. It's a very small plant, yet it manages to attract huge insects such as beetles. Sure, it doesn't kill the beetles, but it does hold them in place until the plant has digested their acids. Then it releases the beetles and they get to leave with only minor injuries. These plants are all very different, yet they all use unique methods to trap their prey. Some are passive, while others are extremely active, but all of them are very fascinating. Plants may not seem like much, but they're capable of some very scary things. Who knows? Maybe one day someone will discover a plant that kills humans, too. They ruled without force. They ate their own. They killed for love. They died from kindness. For wars, for lessons. And in the world of ants, the deadliest threat is often the one they never saw coming. Subscribe now to BattleAnts and witness the wars no one else will tell.